Good morning, friends. Today I wish to speak to you about India's foreign policy, an evolving one, while navigating through a multipolar world and championing the cause of the global south. We stand at a pivotal moment in international relations where the established norms and power dynamics of decades are undergoing a profound transformation. The geopolitical landscape is shifting beneath our feet, presenting both unprecedented challenges and remarkable opportunities for nations like India. For too long, the global narrative has been around governance and economic development that has been shaped by a select few, often neglecting the aspirations and perspectives of a vast majority. Today, we shall delve into how India, a civilization state with a rising global stature, is not merely reacting to these changes but actively shaping a new paradigm. So, in our journey today, we shall explore the fascinating evolution of India's foreign policy. From the foundational principles of non alignment to its current dynamic engagement with a complex, interconnected world. We will analyze the seismic shifts in global geopolitics that necessitates this evolution, examining the rise of new power centers, resurgence of great power competition, and the emergence of non-traditional security threats as well. We shall focus on strategic new alliances and multilateral formations that India is spearheading, understanding the significance of the regional and global stability and their profound impact on India's national interests. Crucially, we will look at the aims, framework, and future course of action of the Global South Group, a collective voice that India has been increasingly championing. This movement is not merely about solidarity. It's about a systemic change, an equitable development, and a more representative global order. By the end of this discussion, we will have a comprehensive understanding of the forces that are driving India's foreign policy, its strategic objectives, its vision for a more inclusive and balanced international system. You'll have insights into India's intentions and the tangible steps that needs to be taken to realize this vision, particularly through the lens of the global south. Let's look at the heart of India's diplomatic strategy, which has been based on the fundamental principles of non-alignment. India's diplomatic journey began in the crucible of post colonialism, a world that was fractured by ideological divides and the nascent Cold War. The architects of independent India, led first by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, envisioned a foreign policy that would not only safeguard national sovereignty, promote peace, and champion the cause of independent nations. This vision culminated in the philosophy of non alignment. After gaining independence in 1947, India was faced with immense challenges, both internal and external. Internally, of nation building, poverty, and communal strife. Externally, the world was in turmoil. It was rapidly being polarized into two power blocs: the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the communist East, led by the Soviet Union. For a nation that was just emerging from colonial subjugation, aligning with either bloc was seen as a potential compromise of the hard won independence and a perpetuation of the external influence. So Nehru, deeply influenced by the Gandhian principles of peace and non-violence, sought a third way. This third way was rooted in the belief that India could best serve its interests and contribute to global peace by maintaining an independent stance, evaluating the international issues on their merits, rather than through the prism of superpower rivalry. It was a pragmatic choice, no doubt, born out of necessity and idealism. India needed aid and technology from both the blocs for its ambitious developmental plans, and aligning exclusively with one would alienate the other. Moreover, Nehru believed that India had a moral obligation to speak for the millions of Asian and African citizens who were still under the colonial rule or struggling post colonial challenges. So, what were the principles of the non aligned movement? It included an independent foreign policy, that is, refusal to join military blocs or alliances orchestrated by the great powers, peaceful coexistence, advocating for the resolution of international disputes through peaceful means, respect for sovereignty, and non interference in the internal affairs of other countries. The third was anti colonialism and anti imperialism, strong support for self determination and the liberation of colonized people. Disarmament, calling for a global nuclear disarmament and reduction of conventional arms was its third pillar. And last but not the least was economic development, promoting South South cooperation and demanding a more equitable international economic order. The primary objectives of this non-aligned movement was to preserve national independence, promote world peace, and foster economic cooperation from the among developing nations. It sought to create a moral force in international politics, providing a collective voice for the nations that felt marginalized by the superpowers. Non-alignment movement achieved significant success, particularly during the Cold War. It provided a new platform for the newly independent nations to assert their sovereignty and resist pressures from both the blocs. It played a crucial role in the decolonization efforts, particularly in Africa. It contributed to detente between the superpowers by advocating for dialogue and arms control. Economically, it fostered a sense of collective identity, pushing for a new economic order, although its full realization remained elusive. Still, India played a leadership role on the world stage. It amplified its diplomatic influence far beyond its economic or military might. But despite its success, did the non aligned movement have any difficulties? Yes, it did. Its ideological diversity often led to internal divisions and a lack of unified action. The very principle of non alignment was challenged when member states faced conflicts, such as the Indo-China War in 1962, Vietnam Cambodia conflict. Furthermore, some critics argue that we often tilted towards the Soviet bloc, especially given India's closer ties with USSR. But as the Cold War waned, questions arose as to the future of this non-aligned movement. The main key points which influenced this foreign policy was strategic autonomy. This was the bedrock. It was the right to make independent foreign policies, choices based on national interest, free from external coercion or alignment. This principle still continues to strongly influence India's current diplomacy. The peace and non-violence of the India civilizational ethos and Gandhian legacy promoted international peace and resolved conflicts through dialogue was a consistent theme. Disarmament. India was a vocal advocate for nuclear disarmament. Even while developing countries had its own nuclear capabilities as a deterrent, arguing that for a universal, non discriminatory disarmament is essential. We often took a strong moral stance against all forms of oppression, apartheid, and racial discrimination, which was a defining feature cementing India's solidarity with the developing world. Was India's major relationships with some countries of the world? Let's look into that. With USSR, India developed a strong strategic partnership with the Soviet Union, particularly after the 1971 Indo Soviet Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation. This provided India with a crucial military hardware, economic aid, and diplomatic backing, especially on issues like Kashmir. While not a formal alliance, it was a close relationship born out of shared interests and a Soviet willingness to support India's industrialization. With USA, the relations were often cool, marked by suspicion and divergence on several issues, including Kashmir, India's nuclear program, and its non aligned stance. Despite periods of engagement, a deep strategic trust did not fully materialize even during this era. With the developing nations, India positioned herself as a leader and advocate for the developing world, fostering South South cooperation using forums like the Non Allied Movement, the Group of 77, to articulate the concerns of the global South. India's socialist inspired economic model of self reliance, that is, import substitution industrialization, also profoundly influenced the foreign policy. The need for technology and capital from both the blocs, without becoming economically dependent on either, reinforced the non aligned stance. India sought to diversify its economic partnerships to avoid over reliance on any single power, a strategy that continues in a different form today. The challenges and shifts up to the late 20th century, particularly after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, India's foreign policy faced its greatest challenge. The ideological landscape that birthed non aligned movement vanished. India simultaneously embarked on major economic reforms, liberalizing its economy and integrating more deeply with the global market. This necessitated a re evaluation of its foreign policy, moving from a primarily non aligned stance to a more pragmatic, multi aligned approach focused on economic growth and security in a unipolar world. The seeds of today's dynamic foreign policy were sown in this era of profound global and domestic change. So, what is the present changed scenario in international geopolitics? This 21st century has ushered in an era of unprecedented complexity and flux in international relations. The comfortable certainties of the post Cold War unipolar moment have evaporated, giving way to a volatile, unpredictable, and increasingly multipolar world. Understanding these profound shifts is crucial to grasping the rationale behind India's current foreign policy calculus. For nearly 2 decades after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States enjoyed a period of unparalleled global dominance, often termed as the unipolar moment. Its economic, military, and cultural influence was unmatched, shaping international norms and institutions. However, this moment proved transient. The past 2 decades have witnessed the undeniable rise of multiple power centers, fundamentally altering the global distribution of power. The most significant shift that can be seen has been the economic ascent of Asia, especially China. China's rapid economic growth has transformed it into the world's second largest economy, a major trading power, and a technological contender. Other emerging economies, while not challenging the US dominance in the same way, contribute to a more diffused economic power structure. Then there is the diffusion of military power. While US still retains significant military superiority, other nations are modernizing their defense capabilities. Russia has reasserted its military strength, particularly in its immediate neighborhood. China's military modernization is rapid and extensive, challenging US primacy in the Indo Pacific. Regional powers are also investing heavily in their defense, leading to a more complex security environment. Most recently, we saw that the military capacity of Iran in the conflict between US Israel on the one hand and Iran on the other, and its impact on the entire Middle East region. Ideological pluralism. The end of the Cold War was often declared as the end of history, implying the triumph of liberal democracy. However, alternative models of governance and economic development have emerged, challenging the universality of this Western liberal norms. Even authoritarian states, particularly China and Russia, offer different visions of global order, leading to a contest of ideals and ideas and also values on the other. Thus, multipolar reality means that no single nation can unilaterally dictate global outcomes. Influence is now negotiated. Coalitions are fluid, and power is exercised through a variety of means, including economic leverage, technological prowess, and diplomatic networks. At the heart of the current geopolitical landscape is the intensifying great power competition, which manifests primarily in two dimensions. The US China rivalry, this is arguably the defining geopolitical context of our time. It encompasses economic competition, trade wars, technological decoupling, ideological differences, that is, democracy versus authoritarianism, and strategic competition, particularly in the Indo Pacific. The US views China's rise as a challenge to the liberal international order it helped to create, while China seeks to establish a more Sino-centric regional order and greater global influence. This rivalry impacts everything from global supply chains and technological standards to human rights and regional security. Then, in Russia's resurgence under President Vladimir Putin, Russia has sought to reclaim its great power status, often through assertive foreign policy actions. Its annexation of Crimea in 2014, intervention in Syria, and the full scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 represent a direct challenge to the post Cold War security architecture in Europe and have fundamentally altered relations with the West. Russia now seeks to undermine NATO expansion, secure its sphere of influence, and project power on the global stage, often aligning with China in broader anti Western alignment. So, these great power dynamics create a complex operating environment for nations like India, which must navigate these rivalries without becoming entangled or compromising their strategic autonomy. So, what are the global challenges? We have the climate challenge, pandemics, technological disruptions, supply chain vulnerabilities. Beyond the traditional state on state competition, the world faces growing array of transnational challenges that demand collective action but are often exacerbated by geopolitical tensions. Let us take the climate change. The existential threat of climate change, with its devastating impacts on weather patterns, sea levels, resource availability, requires unprecedented global cooperation. However, agreement on mitigation and adaptation strategies still remain fraught with political and economic disagreements, particularly between the developed and developing nations. Then we had the COVID 19, a pandemic that starkly exposed the interconnectedness of the world and the fragility of the global health systems. It highlighted the need for international cooperation in vaccine development, distribution, and crisis management. Yet also revealed tendencies towards vaccine nationalism and supply chain protectionism. Then, how can we forget the technological disruption that has captured the whole world? The rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, and cybernetics offer immense potential, no doubt, but also pose significant ethical, security, and economic challenges. The race for technological supremacy is a key battleground in the great power competition, leading to calls for technological sovereignty and concerns about data governance and digital authoritarianism. This has created conflicts amongst nations and the vulnerability of the developing nations. Then we have the supply chain vulnerabilities. The pandemic, geopolitical tensions, and the natural disasters that have been exposing the fragility of the global supply chains, leading to shortages of critical goods, inflation, and economic instability. Now, the nations are trying to seek to diversify and de risk these supply chains, often through reshoring or friend shoring, which has profound implications for global trade and investment patterns. Let us look at the instabilities in the Middle East, the Indo Pacific tensions. Specific regions still remain flashpoints, requiring constant diplomatic attention. The Middle East. The region continues to grapple with geopolitical rivalries like the Iran Saudi Arabia, the internal conflicts, the Israeli Palestinian issue. Energy security, terrorism, and proxy conflicts still remain the key concerns. The Indo-Pacific tensions has been stretching right from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, and it has become a new geopolitical center of gravity. Tensions are rising over territorial disputes in the South China Sea, Taiwan, and the broader competition between China and the US and its allies. And India, as a major Indo Pacific power, has a critical stake in maintaining a free, open, and inclusive regional order. There is an economic interdependence and as against the deglobalization trends. Interdependence at the same time a kind of a separatist tendencies. For decades, the world moved towards greater economic interdependence, driven by free trade, investment flows, and global supply chains. However, recent trends have shown a partial reversal, like, for example, the rise of protectionist sentiments and the use of tariffs and trade barriers as geopolitical tools. The US China trade war challenged the principles of free trade. Concerns about supply chain resilience and national security are leading some nations to bring production closer to home or allied countries, potentially fragmenting global trade networks. Then, of course, sanctions and economic coercions are increasingly being used as a tool of foreign policy, raising questions about their efficacy and impact on global economic stability. Despite these trends and a fundamental economic interdependence still remains. And the challenge for the nations is to navigate through this tension, leverage for the benefits of the global integration while mitigating the risks. So the traditional military power remains important, no doubt, but the definition of power itself has broadened. Economic power. The economic size, trade volumes, financial influence, and control over critical resources are increasingly potential tools of the statecraft. Next is technological power. The leadership in cutting edge technologies like the AI, biotech, quantum computing is seen as crucial for future economic competitiveness and national security. The soft power, namely the cultural influence, diplomatic networks, developmental assistance, and the appeal of a nation's values and institutions play a significant role in shaping the global perceptions and alliances. India recognizes these shifts and is strategically positioning itself to harness all forms of power to advance its national interests and contribute to a more stable and prosperous global order. Although right now this scenario seems very confusing, complex, and dynamic, international environment is forming the backdrop against which India's new foreign policy is still getting formulated into a more clear with greater clarity. But what is emerging from all this is strategic new alliances and multilateral formations. In response to the dramatically altered geopolitical landscape, India has shed the traditional constraints of its erstwhile non aligned posture. While retaining its core principle of strategic autonomy, it has been embracing increasingly a pragmatic, multi aligned, and outcome oriented approach. This involves deepened bilateral ties with key partners and actively engaging in and often initiating new multilateral groupings that reflect its evolving interests and global ambition. This strategic flexibility, sometimes termed as variable geometry or issue based alignments, allows India to pursue its objectives across diverse domains. Now, what is India's response to this changed scenario? We have been evolving a pragmatism over ideology, a shift from ideological non alignment to a more results driven engagement based on national interest. And we follow multi alignment. Rather than aligning with one bloc, India seeks to align with multiple partners on specific issues, creating overlapping, sometimes concentric circles of cooperation. This allows, in a way, to maintain good relations with competing powers simultaneously. It's a big jugglery, no doubt. But this a proactive engagement by India is will no longer instead of no longer merely reacting to the global events, but actively shaping the narratives and outcomes, particularly concerning the Indo-Pacific global governance reform. And the voice of the global south has been significant and quite visible. The comprehensive national power, recognizing that the foreign policy is an extension of the domestic strength. India is leveraging its economic growth, technological prowess, and demographic dividend to enhance its diplomatic leverage. We are strengthening and deepening the bilateral ties US, Europe, Japan, Australia, UAE, Saudi Arabia. Beyond multilateralism, robust bilateral relationships is forming the backbone of India's external strategy. Let us take United States. Once estranged, the US-India relationship has transformed into a comprehensive global strategic partnership. This is driven by shared concerns about China's rise, common democratic values, growing trade and investment, and extensive defense cooperation. The relationship spans defense technology, space, counterterrorism, and education. India sees the US as a crucial partner for technological power and investment and balancing the power in the Indo Pacific. As far as Europe is concerned, the EU, France, Germany, UK, India is significantly deepening its engagement with the European powers. A long-standing strategic partner is France, especially in defense, the Rafale jets, Scorpion submarines, nuclear energy and space. France's concept of a third way in global affairs often resonates with India's strategic autonomy. With Germany, a key economic partner focused on trade, investment, green energy, and technology, and with the European Union, generally, India is working towards has already signed a free trade agreement with the European Union, its third largest trading partner, and collaborating on climate change, digital governance, and multilateral issues. Post Brexit, the UK is keen to forge deeper trade and strategic ties with India, with negotiations for free trade agreement underway. With Japan on the east, a natural strategic partner in the Indo Pacific, sharing democratic values and concerns about regional stability. Cooperation spans high speed rail, infrastructure development, defense exercises, and joint ventures in critical technologies. The Act East policy has a strong Japan component. Down south, Australia is a crucial partner in the Quad and other Indo Pacific initiatives. Relations have deepened significantly, driven by converging strategic interests. Cooperations include defense, the AUSINDEX, intelligence sharing, education, and critical minerals. With UAE and Saudi Arabia, India's engagement has evolved from purely energy centric to comprehensive strategic partnerships. UAE has been a key economic hub, gateway to Africa, and a vital partner in counterterrorism and intelligence sharing. The India UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership is a landmark. Saudi Arabia is a critical energy supplier and a growing partner in investment, infrastructure, and regional security dialogue. Both nations are exploring diversifying their economies and deepening strategies beyond oil. Now, when we come to the key multilateral groupings, we look at the variable geometry in action. In this, we can look at India's participation in diverse multilateral forums, reflecting this multi aligned strategy. Let's take Quad, Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, revived in 2017, comprising of India, US, Japan, and Australia. Initially a maritime security dialogue, it expanded its agenda to promote a free, open, prosperous, and inclusive Indo Pacific. This includes cooperation on maritime security, counter-terrorism, disaster relief, infrastructure development, critical and emerging technologies, climate change, and vaccine delivery. The Quad is seen as a crucial mechanism for balancing China's growing influence and for assertiveness in the region, providing alternative development models and upholding a rules based international order. For India, it provides a platform to enhance its maritime capabilities, engage with leading democracies, and project its influence in its extended neighborhood. Next come BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa expanded in 2024 to include Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE, Ethiopia, and Iran, signaling a significant expansion and a potential to challenge the Western dominated institutions. Originally focused on economic cooperation among major economies, with expansion, it aims to increase the collective voice of the global south, promote alternative financial mechanism, the new development bank as an alternative to the dollar. It has been a challenge and a unipolar initiative narrative. BRICS represents a substantial portion of the world's population and GDP. Its expansion underscores a desire for greater representation in global governance and a push for a more multipolar economic order, offering a counter narrative to the G7 dominance. India leverages BRICS plus countries to engage with major non Western powers and promote its development agenda. Next, of recent origin, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a Eurasian political, economic, and security organization founded by China, Russia, and the Central Asian states. India became a full member in 2017. While its objectives was regional security, countering terrorism, combating separatism and extremism, it was also promoting economic cooperation across Eurasia. For India, the Security Council provides the Shanghai Corporation provides a platform for direct engagement with Central Asian republics, crucial for connectivity and energy security. It allows India to participate in regional security dialogues between China and Russia, manage potential flashpoints, and foster stability in its extended neighborhood, particularly concerning Afghanistan. The another group was I2U2, India, Israel, UAE, USA. Formed in 2021, dubbed as the West Asian Quad, its objective was to foster economic cooperation, particularly in areas like water, energy, transportation, space, health, and food security. It aims to leverage the technological prowess of Israel and US, the investment capital of the UAE, and the market size and talent like that of India. The I2U2 signifies a strategic convergence in the Middle East, driven by shared economic interests and a desire for regional stability. For India, it diversifies its partnership in a critical regional way, enhancing the food and energy security and providing access to advanced technology and investment. The other multilateral groupism was Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, IPEF. It was launched by US in 2022 involving 14 countries including India. The objective was to strengthen the economic engagement among Indo-Pacific partners on issues like trade, supply chain resilience, clean energy and anti-corruption. It's not a traditional free trade agreement, but a framework for establishing high standard commitments. The IPEF allows India to shape economic rules and standards in the Indo Pacific, diversifying its supply chains away from over reliance on any specific country or on any single country, and collaborate with emerging economic challenges. The others were G7 or G20 engagement, the Raisina dialogue influence. India is a permanent member of the G20, a premier forum for international economic cooperation, and is regularly invited to G7 summits. But these platforms allow India to shape the global economic governance, advocate for the global south, and engage with world's leading economies. The Raisina Dialogue, and India's flagship annual geopolitical and geo-economic conference, has emerged as a significant platform for global dialogues, reflecting India's growing intellectual and diplomatic leadership in shaping international discourse. Now, in this frame of things, how does the concept of variable geometry fit into India's foreign policy? All this array of partnerships that we saw illustrates a variable geometry. India's ability to engage with different groups of countries on different issues based on shared interests and desired outcomes. It is a case on case basis. It allows India to be a member of the Quad, that is, with democratic partners, the BRICS with the non Western powers, the SCO with China and Russia, simultaneously without compromising the strategic autonomy. This nuanced approach is the hallmark of the sophisticated 21st century diplomacy. We have been doing a balancing act, maintaining strategic autonomy while forging new partnerships. This has been an ultimate challenge for India. But it's to be seen whether it's able to maintain its cherished strategic autonomy amidst these complex and often overlapping alliances. So, what does it involve? It will involve diversification, ensuring no single partnerships becomes overwhelmingly dominant. Then issue-based engagement, collaborating with interests where interests converge while reserving the right to disagree or act independently where they diverge. And multilateralism, using multiple forums to amplify its voice and avoid being boxed into a single narrative. But all this will depend on an internal strength, building a robust economy and defense capability to underpin its diplomatic assertiveness. By skillfully navigating this intricate web of relationships, India aims to maximize its influence, secure its national interests, and contribute to a more stable, equitable, and multipolar world order. So, how significant is this India's new foreign policy? And what will be its impact and its future? The strategic shifts in India's foreign policy are not merely academic exercises, they carry a profound significance. It's already demonstrating tangible impacts and are charting a clear course for India's role in the 21st century. This new approach is designed to secure India's interests in a rapidly changing world, enhance its global standing, and contribute to global stability and prosperity. The significance of India's evolving foreign policy can be understood across several critical dimensions. Let us briefly look into each of them. One is enhancing India's global stature and influence. By engaging actively across multiple forums and forging diverse partnerships, India is solidifying its position as a major global player. Its voice is now sought on critical international issues. from climate change to global health to economic governance and regional security. This enhanced stature allows India to punch above its weight and influence global narratives and policy outcomes. It signals India's transition from a recipient of a global norm to a shaper of new international frameworks or dialogues. But the challenge would be securing national interests, economic growth, security, technological advancement. At the core, any nation's foreign policy is designed to serve the national interests. For India, these are multifaceted. One is economic growth. Partnerships with US, Europe, Japan, and Gulf nations are crucial, not only for attracting foreign direct investment, expanding the trade markets, securing critical resources, but also in integrating the global supply chains. The focus on economic diplomacy is paramount for sustaining India's developing aspirations. Security. Strategic defense partnerships with the US, France, Russia, Israel provide access to advanced military technology, no doubt. But the joint training and intelligence sharing is crucial if we are to bolster India's defense capabilities against traditional and non-traditional threats. Multilateral security dialogues like the Quad and SCO contribute to regional stability and counter-terrorism efforts. As far as technological collaborations are concerned, on critical and emerging technologies, the ICT with the US, digital partnerships with Europe, space cooperation with France and Russia are vital for India's technological sovereignty, innovative ecosystems, and future economic competitiveness. Diversifying partnerships through this multi alignment strategy inherently seeks to diversify India's external engagements, reducing over reliance on any single country or a bloc. This lessens vulnerability to external pressures and enhances India's strategic autonomy. But at the same time, it has created tensions of conflict of interests and ideologies and a lot of misunderstandings if the diplomatic relations are not communicated effectively to have clarity in the dialogues and understandings. For instance, while maintaining defense ties with Russia, India has significantly diversified its arms imports and defense technology, like a partner with partnerships with US, France, and Israel. Similarly, economic partnerships are being broadened to de-risk supply chains and ensure energy security from multiple sources. Another aspect of this variable geometry is about global governance and stability. India, as the world's largest democracy and a rising power, recognizes its responsibility to contribute to a stable, rules based international order. Its advocacy for multilateralism, UN reforms, and a more equitable global economic system underscores this commitment. While participating in these diverse groupings, India seeks to bridge the divides, promote dialogue, and find common solutions to global challenges. This, of course, offers a net security provider and a voice for moderation and stability. Basically, we have been looked upon for mediation efforts, but the extent to which our influence has been having an impact is still questionable. The impact of this evolved foreign policy is already visible. The economic impact. India's trade volumes with key partners like US, EU, and Gulf nations have surged. Free trade agreements or comprehensive economic partnerships with countries like UAE and Australia are opening new markets and boosting bilateral trade. Foreign direct investments inflows have increased, driven by greater confidence in India's economic trajectory and stable foreign relations. This has been a thing of the past. And we are in a certain transitionary period where there has been a volatile, there is a reverse trend in this, in all what I have said so in all these aspects, and this is a passing phase. This too shall pass away. Just it's a matter of time, and then we need to consolidate and get back on the same track, on the same path. Then we have the supply chain question, resilience. Participating in initiatives like the IPEF and bilateral discussions with partners on critical minerals and semiconductors are aimed at building more resilient and diversified supply chains. This is expected to reduce vulnerabilities exposed during this recent global crisis. As far as infrastructure development is concerned, we have been using the partnership with Japan for high speed rail infrastructure projects in the northeast and various parts of the country, and this is vital for economic growth. Security impact. As far as the maritime security is concerned, the enhanced cooperation with port partners, France and other Indo Pacific navies, through joint exercises and information sharing, has significantly boosted India's maritime domain awareness and capacity to respond to threats in the Indian Ocean region. Of course, this is crucial, but the national security policy released by the US a couple of months back, and which has significantly mentioned the use of the Indian Ocean, the Indian Ocean region for navigation of ships and other vessels, including submarines, from Russia, China, across the Indian Ocean up to the US, and almost like giving a free waterway, is what has been outlined in the National Security Policy, which was released by the US recently. While we seem to have agreed in principle, the same needs to be looked into strategically, to see the extent of protection of our own waters, considering the recent incident of a US submarine torpedoing one of the Iranian ships that had come on an invitation to India at Vishakhapatnam. So, counter-terrorism, deeper intelligence sharing and strategic dialogues with countries like the US, Israel, and Gulf nations need to be further strengthened, because India's counter-terrorism capabilities will depend on that. Border management. While specific alliances don't directly address land border disputes, the broader strategic alignments provide diplomatic leverage and support in managing the complex border challenges. But this requires a more stricter and open and clarity in dialogues and conversations, so that there is no scope for ambiguity and later contention. The technological impact, the collaborations in critical technologies, where we have entered into agreements like the ICET with the US, are facilitating collaboration on semiconductors. AI, quantum computing, and space technology, crucial for India's digital transformation, and strategic autonomy are critical, no doubt. But this includes joint research, co-development, and transfer of technology, which is one area that is neglected. Digital transformation. Partnerships which are supporting India's ambitious digital public infrastructure initiatives, leverage global best practices and technological expertise. But we need at the same time to safeguard the security of our data. Diplomatic impact, increased voice in international forums. India's active diplomacy has amplified its voice in the G20, UN, and other multilateral bodies. Its presidency of the G20 in 2023 was a testament to its growing influence in shaping agendas, outcomes, and issues ranging over a wide array of topics, from climate, finance, to digital public infrastructure. India has been increasingly operating more as a mediator, a potential bridge builder between different power blocks, leveraging its multi aligned posture to foster dialogue and de escalate tensions. Looking ahead, this kind of positioning, multi aligned positioning, has a need to be carefully looked into, and and we should be actively considering national interests as a priority while engaging or trying to bridge between conflicting groups. Continue diversification and balancing. India will continue to expand its network of partnerships. But what is necessary to ensure is the strategic options still remain open. This means balancing the engagement with the West, Russia and China, while deepening ties with the global South, Southeast Asia, and Africa. So the goal is to maximize benefits from all these relationships without becoming subservient to any of them. So the focus is on economic diplomacy and technology. Economic growth will remain a paramount driver of this foreign policy. Expect continued emphasis on securing FTAs like attractive investments, ensuring energy, resource security, and leveraging India's growing market and talent. Technology will be central, with efforts to become a hub for R&D. Hopefully, with greater investments, with private participation along in support of the government's initiatives. Strengthening of the defense partnerships as geopolitical competition intensifies. India will have to continuously modernize its military and strengthen the defense industrial cooperation. This will involve it is happening for diversifying the defense procurement, but it needs to be substantiated by promoting indigenous manufacturing, engaging in more complex joint military exercises, enhance interoperability, and strategic deterrence. So, this will remain a central challenge. India will strive to maintain its strategic autonomy by avoiding explicit alignment with either the US or China instead of choosing issue based cooperation. It will leverage its unique position to act as a crucial swing state, influencing the balance of power and promoting a multipolar world order that is more conducive to its national interests. The term Vishwaguru that was conferred upon it after our Prime Minister declared the Yoga Day in the United Nations, following a controversy of the intellectual and copyright issues on various yoga asanas. And to settle that dispute, the International Yoga Day was declared at the United Nations. And the title of Vishwaguru was either confirmed or assumed. This title itself offered a civilization, it signified or represented a civilizational wisdom, democratic values, and a developmental experience to the world. So this was grabbed, accepted by various countries of the world, advocating for human centric globalization, sustainable development, and inclusive growth. The G20 presidency, whose theme was Vasudeva Kutumbakam, One Earth, One Family, One Future, exemplifies this aspiration. India wants to set an example, lead by example, that by offering solution rooted in its own experiences and respectful of diverse perspectives. In essence, so this India's new foreign policy is a sophisticated, agile, and ambitious strategy designed to navigate the turbulent waters of the 21st century geopolitics, secure its national destiny, and contribute meaningfully to a more just and stable global order. Now, here the last item that remains is about the Global South, a group, a cornerstone of India's evolving foreign policy, and indeed its vision for a more equitable global order is its assertive championship of this Global South. This is not a new concept. It dates back to the spirit of Bandung and the non-aligned movement. But it has gained more urgency and strategic importance in today's multipolar context. India sees itself not as a member of the Global South, but as its leading voice, articulating its aspirations and seeking concrete action. The term Global South broadly refers to countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, often characterized by shared experiences of colonialism, economic underdevelopment, marginalization in global governance structures. However, the modern definition is more nuanced. It's beyond geography. It's less about restricting the geographical location and more about shared developmental strategy challenges, historical experiences, and a common desire for a more just and international system. Yes, it includes emerging economies and developing nations that desire a greater presence in the world stage. The global south is not, it's diverse in its cultures, political systems, and economic developments. However, a unifying thread is the aspiration for sustainable development, climate justice, and a voice in shaping the global norms. The Global South collectively seeks to challenge the established, often Western centric rules and institutions of global governance, advocating for reforms that reflect contemporary power realities and the needs of the majority world. So, India, as the voice of the Global South, particularly under its G20 presidency in 2023, brought about a certain leadership role which mainly stems from the demographic weight, the sheer size of its population, representing a significant portion of the global south. And India's journey of development itself, its successes, its various the digital platforms and challenges, it resonates with many of these global south nations. At the same time, its multi aligned foreign policy allows it to engage with all the major powers while championing the interests of the developing countries without being seen as aligned to any one particular bloc. So, this is a advantage of strategic autonomy. At the same time, India's historical role as in the decolonization and consistent advocacy for equity and justice has lent a certain moral authority So that is how India's leadership has crystallized as a leader of the global south. A fundamental goal that has been that closes the gap between the developed and the developing nations, which includes advocating increased accessible developmental finance, technology transfer, capacity building. All this focuses on sustainable developmental goals, therefore, thereby ensuring inclusive growth. Climate and environmental issues and energy transitions has been a major issue, and the global south bears a disproportionate burden of the climate change, despite historically contributing less to us in terms of emissions. A key aim is to demand climate justice, including greater financial support from the developed nations for adaptations and mitigation. And this has been a common factor which has differentiated responsibilities in terms of approach to the emission reductions. This also emphasizes an equitable energy transition that does not hinder developmental aspirations. How can we reform the global institutions which are already there, such as the UN, the WTO, IMF? The existing global governance architecture, which was largely designed as a part of the post World War II, is still seen as unrepresentative and outdated. The global south, particularly led by India, advocates for a comprehensive reforms of the institutions like the UN Security Council, that is almost, and for a permanent representation there, the World Trade Organizations for more fair trade rules, and International Monetary Fund, World Bank for greater voice and equitable lending practices. India has been successfully contributing in digital public infrastructure. The greatest initiative being the Aadhaar and the UPI. We have been championing its adoption in the global south. The aim is to leverage digital technology to achieve financial inclusion, efficient service delivery, and economic empowerment, bypassing the traditional infrastructural hurdles. As far when any discussion as far as the global south is concerned cannot be without the food crisis, the vulnerabilities of food and energy supply chains. So the global south seeks to build collective resilience, diversify the sources, and ensure equitable access to essential resources, mainly through South South cooperation. So, what is the framework for the South South cooperation? The framework is built on the principle of South South cooperation through mutual respect and solidarity for mutual benefit, non interference, and rather than the traditional the donor recipient models that has its own strings attached. Then there is a leveraging of the shared best practices. For example, India's digital public goods, Brazil's social programs, Africa's renewable energy initiatives. It's based on also the principle of collective bargaining, presenting a united front in international forums to advocate shared interests and negotiate more favorable terms. Capacity building for the purpose of technological assistance, training, and knowledge transfer have always been on the agenda of developing nations. So the intentions have been mainly collective bargaining power and alternative developmental models. This has enhanced the global south's collective bargaining power and alternative, which has shaped a multipolar world order. What will be the future course of action? India is actively pursuing several avenues in the global south's agenda. That is, India's G20 presidency successfully brought the African Union into the G20 as a permanent member, a landmark achievement for the global south. India will continue to push for the implementation of other G20 outcomes that benefit developing nations, such as climate finance commitments and debt restructuring. And of course, India will continue its robust advocacy for comprehensive UN Security Council reform, seeking permanent membership for itself. Promoting digital public infrastructure globally is another area of interest for bringing and fostering digital transformation in financial institute and financial inclusion. As a voice of the global south, India is fostering dialogue and concrete collaborative projects in renewable energy and healthcare education. India will advocate the debt vulnerabilities. Address the debt vulnerabilities. That is, advocating for sustainable debt solutions and responsible lending practices for developing countries, while working with the international financial institutions and bilateral partners. Although India itself has not been able to favorably get a trade negotiations or tariff negotiation in terms of uh, food area, the agriculture and foodstuffs and inputs for the agriculture, for the animal health, for the dairy products, India has been building a resilient food systems by diversifying energy sources and ensuring affordable access to essential commodities, particularly for the other countries of the global south, through negotiations. By relentlessly championing for the global south, India is not only securing its own future, but also striving to create a more inclusive, equitable, and stable global environment for all. So, this kind of a foreign policy is very deeply rooted in our past, yet boldly oriented towards shaping a future for a large section of the humanity. So, we have, in this last 1 hour or so, we have traversed a comprehensive journey from the historical non aligned movement of India's foreign policy to its current dynamic and multifaceted engagement with a rapidly transforming world. We have adapted ourselves from that non alignment and strategically placed ourselves in this present condition of a decline in the unipolar moment and the rise of a complex multipolar order characterized by an intense greater power competition and innumerable transitional challenges. So just to sum up, we have looked at the we have moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment, navigating multipolarity, no longer dominated by a single power, by multiple power centers of influence, demanding a more flexible diplomacy for India, and fostering strategic partnerships, deepening bilateral ties with global players like the US, Europe, Japan, Australia, and Gulf nations, leveraging all of them for economic security and technological advancements. The new multilateral formulations, the formations like the BRICS, SCO, I2U2, and also championing for the global south, India's foreign policy is tilted towards an assertive leadership. This evolving policy is already yielding significant economic security and diplomatic dividends. While it may not be immediately visible in terms of the volatility in the geopolitical environment prevailing at present, it's in the transition phase, but the response and the approach of certain influential nations of the world approaching India for dynamic ties and long term relationships goes to show that there is some and substance in India's foreign policy that we have been pursuing so far. So India's vision for the 21st century acts more as a bridge builder, a voice for the voiceless, a contributor to the global public goods. It seeks a world order that is multipolar and pluralistic, where power is diffused and diversified between civilizations, contributing to global governance. It's sustainable, inclusive, aiming at peace and prosperity, shared prosperity to all. India's foreign policy is a testament to its civilizational ethos of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. It is a strategy that balances national interest with global responsibility, asserting India's rightful place on the world stage while striving for a future that benefits all of humanity. As India continues its ascent, its diplomatic acumen and strategic foresight will be critical in navigating the complexities ahead and shaping a more stable, just, and prosperous global future. As we come to the conclusion of this discussion, I thank you for your attention and engagement on this vital discussion. Thank you so much.